heard of the multiple forms of capital? It's the theory that there are numerous ways in which we can be wealthy beyond our finances. This week's guest, Laura Oldanie, is a green living and money coach who spoke to me about the concepts and the practicalities related to living a rich and resilient life. As makers, we are used to flexing our creativity and resourcefulness. So let's investigate how we can apply these skills more broadly to achieve abundance, resilience and wealth. So please stick around a few minutes so we can get stuck into all that. Welcome to Check Your Thread, the podcast that will help you sow more sustainably. My name's Zoe and I'm obsessed with sewing. I've been blogging about it for over 16 years and I'm the creator and host of the popular handmade wardrobe challenge Me Made the May. But, like many people, I've become increasingly concerned about the climate crisis and I'm looking at the way that my lifestyle contributes to it. So in this podcast, I'll be nerding out about making clothes whilst exploring how to minimise the negative impact that it may have. And I really hope you'll join me in this journey. So how's it going, lovely one? Have you been doing any mending or making lately? I had a great time this week hosting the 2 mending meetups that take place via Zoom for patrons of the podcast. I fixed some kids' joggers, some kids' scout trousers, and I patched yet more socks. So now the decks are slightly cleared, I can crack on with my current from scratch sewing project. Something lovely related to mending was sent to me by a Check Your Thread follower called Melissa recently. Melissa kindly gave me permission to share it with you because it is so heartwarming and also really rallying. So Melissa said, "Hi Zoe, I just wanted to share a quick story with you. My 4-year-old came home from kindy this week with a hole in the back of his leggings. The first thing he said to me was, 'Mum, there's a hole in my pants. Can you put a dinosaur on it?' I'd patched leggings last year with some dino fabric and he remembered. So I'm spending my Saturday evening cutting some dinos out of a stained, outgrown t-shirt and patching his leggings. It was one of those wow moments that made me remember how much impact we can have on the next generations by something as simple as fixing or mending something rather than throwing it away." How freaking cool is that? If you ever thought that performing the odd mend here or there wasn't actually going to have much of an impact on the planet, let this example be proof that you might actually be guiding the next generation towards a mending mindset. And even if you don't have kids or young people around you, remember that mending in public can have a similar impact. It's not just one pair of leggings that will stay out of landfill for longer, as awesome and important as that is. It can also be much more when you let other people see what you're doing. I love the idea that Melissa's son is proudly wearing his dino patch leggings around his kindergarten for all his little friends to see and admire. Thanks again, Melissa. So, whilst I'm in the thanking frame of mind, I want to say big thanks this week to Sarah, Helen and Lisa for signing up to support the podcast via Patreon. And massive thanks to existing patron Donna for upping the amount of their support. You 4 are total stars. If you've heard me bang on about Patreon and don't actually know what it is, let me explain. Basically, it's a platform that you can access online via patreon.com or their app. It's been set up to help people directly support their favourite content creators. You sign up to give regular monthly financial support to help the creator keep doing their thing, and the creator can then offer their patrons some additional perks by way of thanks. What is great about it is that more of the overall amount of support actually ends up in the pocket of the creator, compared to other ways of supporting them like ad revenue from watching their videos or book sales or such. For creators such as myself, who do not rely on ads in any way to support what we do, it's a vital source of income to cover our expenses and keep everything we're doing viable. So you can find out more at patreon.com and you can check out my page at patreon.com/checkyourthread. So thank you for that. Onwards with today's podcast episode. So today's episode is the first in a 3-part mini-series about finances, sewing and sustainability. As you've probably already noticed, sometimes I like to group together a few episodes that cover a similar topic into a mini-series, which allows us to get into it more deeply. Yonks ago I did a mini-series on sewing on a budget, but this mini-series is very different. This episode will be followed on by next week's that features one of our favourite previous guests, and the conversations are very complimentary. But back to today's. If you enjoyed episode 136 with BD Parker, this conversation has a similar vibe of talking about global issues and ideas and how we can respond to them on a local community and individual level. I think Laura is a really fascinating person and I highly recommend you check out her extensive website, and if you're an Instagram user, definitely check out what she talks about over there. You can can find the links to those in the show notes, along with everything else we talk about in this conversation. So you can find the show notes on the website checkyourthread.com. This is episode 141, or you can find them in the description on your podcast app right now. And whilst you're in your podcast app, please can I ask a favour? Can you please add a rating and short review of the podcast? Apparently it is very helpful to attract new listeners to a show. So thank you so much in advance for that. So until next week, please take care of yourself and please make some time for yourself also. The world is a very stressful place and you can't fight the good fight to the best of your ability if your cup is drained. So please do that and enjoy. You sound like you're in the same room as me. Like, this is incredible quality.
Awesome. I was very fortunate to have one of my early fans gift me a podcasting microphone, and it's not the most expensive, but it's a pretty good one.
Amazing. Have you ever thought about starting a podcast yourself?
I've been asked about it, but I haven't given it that much thought. It just feels like yet another learning curve. And I'm not quite ready to go there. I haven't ruled it out. I'd probably more likely dig deeper into my YouTube channel before I would start a podcast.
Yeah, it's a whole other thing. But I think, yeah, that would be amazing. I think I would definitely be listening.
Well, thank you.
I kind of feel like you've been in my head a lot this week because I've been listening and re-listening to some of your episodes. So it's kind of like, oh no, you're talking to me. It's a bit funny. But thank you again so much for giving me some of your time today. So can we kick things off with you telling us who you are, where you are, and what fills your days?
Sure. So my name is Laura Oldanie. I'm a green living and money coach and the founder of richandresilientliving.com. I'm also co-author of a book called Growing Free, and that free stands for financially resilient and economically empowered, and our subtitle is Building the Life of Your Dreams Without Losing Your Soul or Destroying the Planet. And I am located in Tampa Bay, Florida, so on the Gulf of Mexico. And what fills my days? Well, being an online entrepreneur in her 50s, where so much of content creation is online, a lot of it is, trying to overcome the learning curve of all of the social media and online activity, especially as someone who is, usually drawn to the outdoors, prefers to be out riding her bike. And there's definitely a good bit of that. But I do feel like, yes, as someone who did not grow up with a cell phone in my hand or using social media, and probably wouldn't use it if I weren't an entrepreneur. That is a good bit of my day. I actually live just a mile away from my boyfriend, so a lot of my day is, days are filled with, riding over to his house for lunch or dinner because he's the one that has the time and is a much better cook than I am. So, we're very fortunate to live in a small town engulfed by a larger town, and so I've really been able to prioritize riding my bike, as my main form of transportation. So a lot of my time in my days is on my bicycle, either back and forth to Albert's house, or to the beach, or to friends, or to events and neighbors.
Amazing. I love that so much. So I first discovered you and your work through the Frugal Friends podcast. I listened to that episode and it kind of blew my mind because I hadn't really heard anyone talk about wealth in the way that you've presented it. Because I think that you were talking about things that like a lot of us understand and value, like community and knowledge and stuff like that. But I hadn't heard anyone kind of present it in the way that you present it. You kind of presented these other kind of forms of wealth within the same sphere and given the same importance as like financial wealth that we're obviously all used to hearing about as a form of wealth. So I would really like to know, I guess, to start off with, like, how you first discovered this broader way of looking at wealth.
So how I found it was that I was interested in sustainability and sustainable living. And, I grew up in a household that valued, service and volunteering and a sense of fairness. And had studied and lived abroad, and it was kind of all swirling, recognizing the impact of my dollars and my lifestyle on, people overseas and in my own country. But I was also wanting to understand money, and use it as a tool, a lifestyle design tool. I had discovered the FIRE movement, which the FIRE in the personal finance space stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. I really liked that idea of using money to help me participate less in capitalism and that kind of lifestyle that our culture is shaped in society to make us think that that's the only way. Our schools, all of our systems are set up in a way that move us through all of that and really make us think that that's the only way. And so the environmental consciousness and that sense of fairness have been there for a long time, but discovering the FIRE community, and that happened, in my late 30s. And about the same time, I also discovered permaculture. And so for people that don't know, permaculture is such an unwieldy thing, and there are so many different ways to define it, but it's this ecological design toolkit that really looks to nature's closed loop, no waste, abundance-based system as the model. And most often it's applied in our landscapes, and that's how I found it, but it can be applied to all areas of our lives. And so when I got to permaculture, having also recently discovered FIRE, and in permaculture, people, are also frustrated with capitalism and wanting to design and escape from capitalism and talking about financial freedom, but there wasn't really a roadmap. And people in the FIRE community are generally pursuing FIRE by investing in the stock market,
right,
or accumulating a portfolio of rental properties that exacerbate local affordable housing issues.
Sure.
And so I didn't want that. I didn't want to be investing for my future in ways that were destroying this future that I'm trying to prepare for and harming me and others along the way. And so I wanted permaculture FIRE. What does permaculture FIRE look like? And so I started, when I got to my permaculture design course, I was really interested in the economics and finance petal of the permaculture flower. How do people in America in permaculture have health insurance?
Right.
For us, health insurance is a big thing here. I know it's also an issue wherever you are more and more these days, but especially in the United States without universal health care. It's like, okay, if I'm going to leave the capitalist system, which provides health care, that's a big one because of the expensive costs of health care and the bankruptcy that it can cause. So I did a lot of diving into what do the permaculture texts have to teach us about, what does wealth look like? And that's where I discovered first the multiple forms of wealth or capital. And they're not original to permaculture. It's just that was a framing that became very popular and makes a lot of sense within a permaculture context. And then I kept talking about it, and I started, I met a few more people in the permaculture space interested in those same conversations, and those are the people I ended up co-writing that book Growing Free with.
Awesome.
And so that's really what it emerged from.
Amazing. I love that so much. So at the Check Thread podcast, we talk a lot about resourcefulness and using what already exists in the world. And we talk about that in many forms, and sometimes that forms whole episodes. Sometimes it gets touched on, lightly. But I also try and use this podcast as a way to kind of push back against the idea that you have to have a lot of disposable income, to engage in sewing, to engage in creative practices. And obviously, like sewing on a budget, or more broadly living on a budget and using what already exists, kind of helpfully goes hand in hand. But I'm also discovering more and more that through like my own explorations, that being more resourceful, having to think about things and having to problem solve more, it's actually bringing me more creative fulfillment. And I know that you talk and write a lot about resourcefulness and resilience and wealth and creativity. So could you please define resilience for us as you see it?
Sure. So for me, resilience really is kind of the dictionary definition of it, that ability to withstand and recover from challenges, and hopefully recover quickly. And there's this to my mind, there's this element of, elasticity, flexibility, and adaptability
I love that.
to resilience. And, I talk a lot about that because, being, aware of climate challenges and concerned about them, I think we're going to need a lot of resilience to navigate this, and that having those skills and that resourcefulness to be adaptable, flexible, and elastic to navigate all of this, because it's going to be up and down.
Yeah. And there's no blueprint really either.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of like resilience, how does resilience and wealth kind of interconnect? Like, is it possible to be resilient and wealthy without, for example, having a lot of financial capital?
Well, I want to say first off that my message isn't about not stepping up to money at all. Maybe we can go in that direction a little later. I do think that, yes, I actually think the more you can do without money, the more resilient you are.
Right.
Now, that recognizes that we exist in this time of late stage capitalism where housing, shelter, our basic need is extremely expensive. And certainly there are ways very creative people can find to secure shelter for free in doing exchanges of different kinds. But I think that is limited to people who are very physically healthy, who already have some skills and some social capital.
Yeah. Also, it's not accessible necessarily for people if you've got children, for example, or you have caregiving roles.
Yes. Well, and I do think even for with children in certain situations, but there's something here in the U.S. called the Caretaker Gazette.
Right.
Where you can find caretaking jobs if you have the skills in exchange for housing. But, it's not a given. And again, it's not for everyone. But yes, I do think that the more resourceful you are, but again, there's the privilege of health and social capital and skills to be able to do it, that yes, it's completely possible. But it's also dependent on your age. What happens as you grow older. So I do encourage people to think about that long term. When we're younger and more physically healthy, I think it's a lot easier to access that. And it doesn't mean we have to have money to age, but we have to put a lot of forethought into it to age, without a lot of money and really have experienced the high quality of life.
Yeah, absolutely. I really love the way that you often talk about abundance. So, for example, in the different types of wealth, you can have knowledge abundance and you can have... So maybe you could actually run down the different types of wealth you can be abundant in.
Sure. So, financial capital, we'll talk about them as forms of capital.
Okay.
Financial capital is the first one, and that's the one we all know and use within our capitalist context. So that's money. If you're invested in the stock market, cryptocurrencies, all those financial forms of capital that we place so much emphasis on in our exchanges with each other. Then there is material capital. So that is, the microphones we're talking into, our cell phones, our laptops, our cars, the buildings we're in. Those are tangible, touchable forms of capital that are made of materials. Then we can think of experiential capital, which gets us into skills, the things we learn through experience by doing, whether that's cooking or podcasting or knowing how to repair your bike. Those are forms of experiential capital. Then the knowledge capital, the intellectual capital. So that's, what we learn from school, what we learn in books. It's our creativity and innovation. That's intellectual capital. Then we've got living capital, which is what a lot of people in permaculture are extremely focused on. So, that's the food we're growing in our gardens or our food forests, the fresh air, the waterways, the parks in our neighborhoods, the plants outside our doors. Those are all forms of living capital. Then there is also cultural capital. That's the culture we share with other people, be it films, history, foods, poetry, literature. These are all cultural forms of capital. There's spiritual capital, which is, from some people, it is a religious faith. But it doesn't have to be. It could be yoga or meditation or whatever, just walking out and being in awe of nature. How do you center yourself and make meaning in this crazy universe? And I don't know if I've left off any of the more commonly talked about ones in these 8 forms or multiple forms of capital, but I also think about health as a really important form of capital, and time. I think so many people, when they really think about what they want in life, it's autonomy over their time, to make the choices to how to spend their time the way they would like to spend it. And attention capital, and which is related to time, but it's, we look at how much money, Mark Zuckerberg is making from our attention. What are we directing our attention to? Is it benefiting Mark Zuckerberg and greedy corporations more than it is us?
Yeah.
Or are we directing our attention in ways that are benefiting us and our communities more?
That makes me feel like, when you get the little pop-up on your phone of screen time and it tells you how much screen time you've been engaged in and over the last week, and you're like, oh no, that's terrible. But I love the way that you're framing this, and what it makes me feel like. It makes me feel rich. It makes me feel rich, basically. Like all these different forms of capital, like lead to a rich life, and it kind of makes me feel like, oh, I'm very rich. Like I'm abundant. I feel very fortunate. But I think that whether or not we have, regardless of our amount of financial capital, I think that often we can forget these other forms, can't we? Or not place as much importance as we should. And we can then end up coming at life from a kind of place of like scarcity rather than abundance. Do you think that's true?
Oh, certainly. I think people lose sight of the fact that what they really want in life are the other forms of capital. It's not the financial capital. Financial capital has become the means by which we access, generally, these other forms of capital. And financial capital really is generated from those other forms of capital because we monetize them and turn them into financial capital. And so I always encourage people to think about these other forms of capital and how can you bypass money and access those other forms of capital more directly. Not saying never use money, but just as an exercise, start thinking about that. It's a muscle we can build and flex.
Yeah. What ways have you found to access those other forms of capital?
Well, all right, let's see. For material capital, when I need physical things, I'm very fortunate to live in an area with a time bank. And so a time bank is a local currency, a local bank where the currency is time, not money. And it's dependent on the other members involved and what skills and things, physical things they bring to the time bank. But you exchange with the software, not directly with individuals. And so you're logging time credits in a software. And so we have a Facebook group and a website. And if I want something like a physical good, like I needed a small garden shovel, so I posted that in the time bank, or I'll post it in my local Buy Nothing group, before I will go spend money on it. Or if there's something I think I want to do or need, then I will go into Google and look for DIY, whatever it is I want to accomplish, and see what options exist.
Yeah.
And that's just material capital. Well, and food. I mean, for food, I do a lot of dumpster diving.
Fantastic.
And so a large portion of what I eat comes from dumpster diving, but it also comes from foraging. Around here in Florida, I'm very fortunate. The summer, we've got mangoes and lychees and longans. Right now, we're foraging mulberries. They're almost all year round, not quite. There's something to forage. And since I'm always out on my bike, I'm always looking around and finding where this fruit is just falling. And I'm using my social capital to leave notes on people's doors, and with my phone number when I see a tree in someone's yard where the fruit is falling and not being harvested.
Interesting.
Yeah, I've had some neighbors call me back. I've offered to come harvest their fruit and share the harvest with them.
Oh, I love that so much. And I love the sound of this time back. I heard you talk about that in another podcast. I love that idea so much.
Well, I encourage anyone who hears this that is intrigued by it to Google search time banking, because there are time banks around the world and communities that have come together to create them.
Yeah, amazing. Oh, yeah. And I guess that going those kind of routes, rather than like, oh, I need garden fork, and going to your local hardware store, by thinking, oh, how else can I find this? How else can I access this? You're kind of opening yourself up then to more connections with your community as well, aren't you? Because you're meeting those people that responded, and you're like, oh, I didn't know you live around the corner. Oh, and you could spark conversations that way that you just wouldn't have had if you just went to the till bought the thing. And then you've got all the plastic packaging that you then have to deal with as well.
Yes, precisely. And, that gets back to the resilience, that we were talking about. It increases your resilience so much more to have those connections to people, as opposed to always relying on money, which is so transactional and separated from the person, behind the counter that you're giving the money to. So again, if we're thinking about this climate resilience, or resilience in the face of climate change, getting to know people is a big part of that. But then there's also just the joy factor. So many people feel lonely and disconnected, and this brings more contact and connection into your life. And I think it often leads to spontaneity, spontaneous interactions with each other, with people. And I think people miss that. Everything's so programmed with texting before you get together, or, it opens up more opportunity to know people, especially in your neighborhood, who might just drop by, or if you're out in your yard, it's going to lead to you seeing them for more frequent conversations and just not feeling so isolated.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, okay, so linked to that, so in terms of physical possessions, and obviously there's times when you do need something, or that something's going to benefit your life, but how can we start to feel more content with what we already own, rather than always feeling like we need to be gathering more and more and more? Is it just human nature for us to kind of want to be shoring ourselves up with more stuff? And I'm thinking specifically with fabric or yarn as well, or more resources in that sense.
Sure. Well, I'm not a psychologist, so speaking to human nature is a big one. But
yeah,
I do think,
from what you've seen,
yes, I do think what you were talking about earlier, mentioning the word scarcity. I think some of it is the scarcity mindset. I also think there is this emotional, and scarcity is connected to emotion in psychology, but this sense of self-worth and self-confidence, and just not being content with what we already have, and recognizing what truly makes us content, and monitoring that and having a sense of it, and so often, even if you do go out and get that next piece of fabric or next whatever, it's a temporary lift.
Yeah.
And then you go back down. I mean, for me personally, I'm so tuned into and concerned about sustainability. The small town I live in has a lot of artists, and I love it. I love the creative energy. But there isn't this level of awareness about sustainability among the artists. And there was an open house a couple weeks ago where artists open their homes to come in, and I love the art and creativity, like I said, but this was a paper artist,
right?
And they had all of these really cute paper flowers along the path on the way in that were gorgeous, and then there was this paper pinwheel, all of these products made of paper that were really creative and cute, but to my mind, I was so disheartened that it was all new paper that was used. There's no thought of, or very little And there is upcycled art, and there is more and more of it. But I'd really like to see even more upcycled art, or a consciousness, awareness that, using new and virgin materials has an impact.
Yeah, absolutely. This is something I talk about all the time, because there is really like a large industry now around sewing that is just encouraging us to engage in buying more virgin resources. And it's kind of difficult, because when you're a maker, you kind of then get cast in two roles. Like, you are a creator, but then you are also a potential consumer as well. And it kind of gets a bit murky, because I know that you've spoke before, and I really love this quote of yours, that you were saying that when you open your wallet to solve a problem, you rob yourself of creativity, which I think is amazing. But as a maker, when you're opening your wallet for buying resources to make with, that's meant to be fueling your creativity, So it's kind of difficult to unpack. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I do. Again, I hope more people think about how to use what already exists. There is so much stuff out there for free. It's in our trash sites. People are putting it out at the curb, in the alleys. There are all kinds of sources of it. Again, you can ask for things in your Buy Nothing group or your Free Cycle group. I don't think I'm alone. I think there are a growing number of people who are looking at art using virgin and new materials and not wanting to consume it. I mean, yes, of course, I respect the creativity and the artist's talent, but no, I don't want to buy art and put my money behind supporting this extractive version of art when there are so many materials that you could equally express your creativity with that, are already in circulation.
Absolutely. So in terms of like the way you chose to dress yourself, like how has that been affected by your sensibilities towards treading on the planet lightly?
Sure. Well, for many years, I was a conventional shopper. And, as a child, I remember being in thrift stores with my mother and not wanting to be there. I wanted the name brand clothing, new. But over the years, I veered farther and farther from that. And I started, going to thrift stores and buying clothes. And then once I started dumpster diving, I dumpster dive for a lot of food at grocery stores, but I also would dive sometimes at thrift stores and universities at the end of the semester. And particularly from the thrift stores, they throw away so much clothing.
Yeah, something like only 10% of donations actually end up on the shop floor, isn't it? Something horrendous like that.
Yes. And so if you're wanting to get into dumpster diving, and looking for scraps, check out your thrift store dumpsters, because sadly they're full of stuff. I've earned thousands of dollars selling things that I rescued from thrift store dumpsters.
Like
yes.
What kind of things?
It's like a brand new Rosetta Stone 3-level Swedish set.
Really?
Yes. Old Cuisinart pieces for a meat grinder.
You sell them on eBay or something?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't done it in a while. I used to live closer to a thrift store, and I would ride my bike over there and get a good bit of stuff.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yes. Yes. So that was one way I was getting my clothing, and I still do from time to time, especially from the university dumpsters. Students at the end of the semester, they can't fit the stuff in their car or their storage unit or their suitcase to fly home, and they throw it out. And so there's that. But my town has a number of swap meets. And I'm super fortunate to live in a community where those happen somewhat regularly. And for me, those are so much more fun. Again, it's not only the free clothing, but it's social. My friends go to them. And one of them, they're not happening as frequently, but they were being held in this really eclectic, artsy facility, and they would have a tea party there, and people would bring cookies, and there was a tea set, and there was even a DJ that volunteered there.
That sounds so good.
Oh my gosh, it's so much better than going to a store to buy your clothing. And so at this point, I even have a hard time buying clothing at thrift stores just because I know so much of it is available for free at swap meets. Not to say I don't, but it's like, oh, it's begrudgingly even.
Are you a mender? Do you mend clothing, or do you have someone that you turn to for mending?
So I do basic mending, holes in socks or long seams. I do that. But then I turn to the time bank, for things that are a larger job or beyond my skill level.
So there's people in your community that they've got some skills. Mm-hmm. Fantastic. What do you offer in the time bank, out of interest?
Oh, my regular exchange is with a friend of mine. So when I bought my house, it came with a lawnmower, a pretty good one, but I mulched my yard, so I don't need it. So my lawnmower stays at my friend's house, and then she gives me a time credit every time she uses it.
Oh, amazing. Oh, that's so good. So it's like on permanent loan.
Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes I come home from the dumpster with, again, this abundance of produce or something that it's more than I can use before it goes bad. So I'll offer that up on the time bank or in my Buy Nothing group.
That's brilliant. I think most locations have something, don't they? If it's not a Buy Nothing group, then it's a Free Cycle or a Frugal, or there's an app in the UK, I think it might be even worldwide now, called Olio. Got rid of lots of things via Olio, especially during the pandemic when the charity shops around my area were closed and we were clearing out to move house. I got rid of so many things, like including like a bed. There's lots of things that people can access, isn't there? And once you've just used them once or twice, I think you get used to how they work, don't you? And and it's so exciting because you can then see what people are offering up as well. Or often people are requesting things as well, aren't they? And you can think, oh, actually, I've got a spare one of those. I don't need 2 trowels or whatever.
Yep.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about your gardening. So you're growing food?
I forage a lot of food. I garden. My yard is a north-facing yard, so it is not as suitable for gardening as I would wish. But my boyfriend also has a food, he's got a full-on food forest in his yard.
What is a food forest? How is that different to a garden?
So it emphasizes perennial plants, and primarily trees and bushes. Edible trees. So he's got avocado, mango, star fruit, which are also known as carambola, passion fruit, a neem tree, which isn't so much edible as medicinal and useful.
Oh, interesting. What's that good for?
It's very good for oral or dental health. Like people in countries where these grow, they'll often be chewing on a neem branch. So he will process it and use it in a tooth powder that we use instead of toothpaste.
Oh, cool.
Along with other things that he's growing in his garden. So I have a neem tree as well. In my own yard, I have some olive trees. I have papayas. I'm actually emphasizing soap nuts. Are you familiar with soap nuts?
Yeah, I've heard of them, yeah.
So I haven't harvested anything. I've only been in this house not quite 5 years, and the soap nuts went in, a year and a half to 2 years ago. So I'm still a year or two away from a harvest, most likely. But the soap nuts, you can use them for your laundry, for a cleaning solution, and this is part of my retirement plan, is to, thinking again in multiple forms of capital and beyond just financial capital. This will save me money on, cleaning solution and laundry detergent. It's something that I could potentially sell as an income stream, and I'll have it for gifting and bartering with.
I love this so much. That's so interesting. And the fact that you've got mangoes and avocados and passion fruit, all the things that are I really feel guilty about when I buy because they don't grow around here and we love them. And the fact that they could just be falling off a tree into your yard, I'm like, no. It makes me so jealous.
Well, if it's any consolation, my absolute favorite fruit doesn't grow here.
What's your absolute favorite fruit?
Raspberries, which probably grow where you are.
They do! I've literally got raspberry canes in my garden. I've got raspberry and rhubarb. And that's it. That's the extent of my. I've got a tiny garden, and I've got a fig tree, but it's not quite produced fruit that you can eat yet. I'm hoping this year, because it's about 2 years old now, so I'm hoping it's getting established. I don't know. We've not got quite the right climate. Like I'm at the south of the UK. Figs are a bit more Mediterranean. But so I'm kind of like hedging my bets a bit with that.
There you go. Well, if Sepp Holzer can grow citrus in the Alps, hopefully you can create the microclimate you need to get your figs to succeed.
I hope so. Oh, I wish we could have a swap.
Yeah, right.
Like raspberries for like mango and avocado. So I'd really like to ask you one more question, if you don't mind, and I'd really like to end this lovely conversation on a positive note. So can you tell me about something that's going on either in your life or something you've heard about that's really giving you a lot of hope at the moment for like the future of our planet?
Things that are giving me hope. I think, just seeing more people being interested in this conversation about this nexus, that you wanted to talk about resilience and resourcefulness and wealth in the midst of, a time of climate change and questioning late stage capitalism. I think it's a heavy lift to get out from under late stage capitalism, but more and more people are, waking up to it and wanting to explore, alternatives.
Yeah, but I want to thank you so much because you have had a massive impact on me. And I think just the fact that you are vocalizing a lot of, I think a lot of people are scared to use terms like capitalism and wealth and things like that. And they feel like, oh, if I don't have all the answers, then like, am I in the right place to kind of start conversations, But I love that you're going there and you're talking about the kind of conceptual levels, but you're also talking about really practical things that you can do and you do in your life and as an example as well. So I really want to thank you because you've really had a big impact on me and my perception of a lot of this stuff. So, and I'm so glad that you are, and I think you're amazing at social media. I don't know what you're talking about and you find it difficult. Like, I think the stuff that you produce is fantastic. And I just want to thank you so much because I know that stuff takes a long time and a lot of effort. So I just want to thank you for everything that you do because, yeah, it's really impactful.
Well, thank you. I really, really appreciate that. And thank you for creating the space to have this conversation. I would like to add or go into something we hit on earlier on.
Please.
As much as I talk about saving money, reducing our spending, tapping our creativity and resourcefulness, a large part of this for me is to help those of us who are questioning capitalism and want to help bring about a better future, have more money in our lives to direct towards those solutions, because there are regenerative ways we can use money. We can be putting money towards the solidarity economy, keeping money in our local economies. We can be investing. I've made loans to organic farms. I've invested in a cooperatively owned business. And so I absolutely want people who want to be part of the change to find ways to step up to money so that we can invest in these solutions.
Absolutely, because the money's out there. Some people are going to have it. It'll be the people that are trying to do good with it. So do you have any tips of where people could find out about, if they were looking to invest their money in a more positive either business or endeavor? Do you have any tips of where people can find out about what might be going on like in their country?
So if people are based in the U.S., I have a Pay What You Can course on a beginner's guide to regenerative investing. And I outline, what I've learned about in terms of what investing options I've found for non-wealthy investors to be directing their money this way. For people, in the UK or overseas, there are investments out there. I would start by, maybe looking into permaculture, getting into your permaculture community, and finding potentially organic farms to make loans to. I don't know. Here in the US, we have a platform called Go Steward, and it's a platform that you can use to make loans to regenerative farmers.
Oh, amazing.
Maybe something like that is percolating in the UK.
Brilliant. Well, I'll certainly put links to that. Where can people find you and your work and your book and everything that you do?
Okay. Everything can be gotten to through my website, which is richandresilientliving.com. And, if you're looking for the book or any of these courses that I've prepared, there's the shop page on my website at richandresilientliving.com.
You just sound like you have no shortage of ideas. It sounds like you've just got so many ideas and so many interesting angles and ways to present your work.
Well, thank you. And thank you for giving me another forum, a platform to spread the word that, with the social media, I appreciate your compliments as well, but it's harder and harder on social media to actually land in front of people to get their attention. So I really appreciate this.
Yeah. Well, the good thing about podcasts is once they're up there in the feed, they stay.
Thank you. And I appreciate all you're doing. Your last episode was on using fabric scraps, keep doing the good work and let's normalize this type of thing. I want this to be normal. I don't want the destruction of our earth for these virgin materials to be normal.
Brilliant. Well, this has been amazing. So thank you so much for your time, Laura.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode and are left feeling inspired. For more info about the podcast, including show notes for this and every episode, head to checkyourthread.com. I'd love to hear from you, so if you have any comments, questions or ideas for future episodes, please get in touch by emailing zoe@checkyourthread.com or find me on Instagram @checkyourthread. Massive thanks to Patrick Potter for production support, to Sylvia Seller for the awesome logo design, and to Simon at Palm Skin Productions for the music. This ad-free podcast would not be possible without listener support, so if you feel you are able, please consider signing up to the Check Your Thread Patreon. For the equivalent of buying me a coffee each month, you'll be making it possible to continue producing regular episodes. Links can be found in the show notes and on the website checkyourthread.com. I hope you'll listen again next week. Until then, take care. Bye!